it started out as the esoteric healing system, and it was left for us in the ancient wisdom teachings, and it works with the organs and glands of the body, through the chakra system, all the systems of the body and the body of the soul, to help get at the causal level of dis-ease and disharmony in the body. God, we are a spark of divine consciousness. It's contained within the soul at the monad 12th chakra. They call that the Christ consciousness and God consciousness, universal consciousness. The main thing is, no matter where you are, what you're doing, just trust. Just
Absolutely.
trust in your innate consciousness. It's extraordinary to do it.
Hello and welcome, our beautiful family of light, to the Soul to Soul Conversations podcast. We're so thrilled to be here with you. I'm Caroline Crawford.
And I'm Paul Crawford.
And we have the most wonderful guest with us on this show. She's going to be talking about soul-focused healing. So hello, Deborah Mills.
Hello.
Welcome.
Deborah is the director of Soul-Focused Healing and has been teaching workshops in energy medicine and awakening consciousness since 1995. She's also been co-facilitating mastery training with the Ascended Masters since 2010 to help awaken the divine consciousness within for both personal and planetary awakening. Deborah is dedicated to the evolution of humanity and the completion of the plan of light on Earth. So welcome again, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And it's so interesting. We love talking about synchronicities on this show. Well, the divine most definitely had a hand in this, because on our last podcast with our guest Yoga, her friend told us all about Deborah, and we contacted her because this was the only day that Deborah's actually flown in from North Carolina, another state, that she could be here to record the podcast on the exact day that we do it. And also, I'm going to add, my mum's birthday, who's now in the non-physical. So, I think divine forces have definitely had a little play in this bringing together with this most wonderful modality of healing that Deborah is going to share with us. So
Deborah, would you like to share with us, tell us a little bit more about what soul-focused healing is, and how did you get into that field?
Soul-focused healing is an ancient art of energy medicine. It's been around for a long time. It's what the Essenes practiced at the time of Christ. It's the ancient Tibet. It's been around. And I got into it because I had a daughter that had learning disabilities. And in order to understand what was going on with her, I took her to the Upledger Institute to learn cranial sacral therapy. And then I apprenticed with a cranial sacral therapist. And he went and studied esoteric healing. And he said, this is the most amazing thing that I've ever done. And you have to do it. And then, as spirit would have it, 2 or 3 weeks later, somebody called me from Chapel Hill asking if I would like to come to a workshop with Dr. Tom Shaver. So the rest is kind of history, but it was left for us. It started out as the esoteric healing system, and it was left for us in the ancient wisdom teachings, and it works with the organs and glands of the body, through the chakra system, all the systems of the body and the body of the soul, to help get at the causal level of dis-ease and disharmony in the body. And it's like having a map to the body to figure out the causal level of what's happening when somebody has something physically going on, emotionally, mentally. And once you get to it and you feel it, then you can release that energy and bring the light of the soul in, and we become more soul embodied. So back in, I think it was 2000, I had moved to Miami, and I kept getting this tap on my shoulder from the masters saying, change the name, and it was like, because esoteric healing means the hidden, and it really wasn't so hidden anymore. And so as I was kept getting soul focused healing, and then I went and did an advanced course with my teacher, Dr. Briner, in Michigan, and I told her the masters were asking me to change the name, and she said, "Oh, I'd call it soul focused healing," and I got a rush in my body, and I said, "Done," you know.
Lovely.
So I've been teaching classes. I was on a medical team for a couple years in Miami, and I saw how well it balanced with the medical world. Like, you can get it something so quickly where they're doing all their expensive tests, and you know, it's an amazing system of healing.
It sounds it. And it's interesting because we had a little conversation together yesterday evening, didn't we? And we were saying that, you know, Paul and I originally trained or were spiritual healers. But when we moved out of London back to my hometown of Northampton, people were like, "Oh, spiritual healing," you know, I don't know what they thought was going to happen. It wasn't so acceptable. So Reiki came along, and we trained in Reiki, and it just seemed much more acceptable. That word esoteric and spiritual, like, for some reason, people, you know, it just puts people into, "Oh, what's that?" You know, a little bit. So I think that it's interesting, isn't it, how these things come together. But how would you say that soul-focused healing differs from other energetic systems? Because they all draw on that divine energy and channeling that divine energy. But how would you say soul-focused healing differs into what you offer?
Well, I've often said it's the PhD of energy healing, because it works very specifically with the anatomical design of the body. And everybody has a liver in the same place, or their heart. And when you speak about it, it's very relatable to people. Where just, spiritual healing is amazing because the energy, like you said, the energy is the energy and it comes in. But with soul-focused healing, it comes in and it goes specifically. You're holding the energy, you're holding those 3 points, and it'll feel imbalanced or blocked, and you just bring that energy in and it just opens. And it gets at the causal level of what seems to be happening in somebody. And then once it's released, that pattern is gone, and the soul then can come more into that place. They say that all dis-ease is the result of inhibited soul life. And so as we free the human being from the patterns we've collected, however many lifetimes we've had, and we've developed patterns, and the soul comes each lifetime with a permanent atom, like a permanent atom of the physical, a permanent atom of the emotional body, the mental body, the causal body, and the body of the soul. It holds the imprint of what we need to learn, and it's almost like the stuff we haven't cleared from another lifetime. We bring it in with us, and that's what we have to work with this lifetime. And sometimes it shows up. You see that in small children that have cancer or have a disease process. It's something karmically that they brought in with them. And so as the personality body starts to get cleansed and cleared, then there's more light of the soul that comes in, and we begin to embody our soul at a constantly new levels. It's an ongoing journey and an ongoing process. And then we spoke last night about the petals of the soul, like at the 8th chakra. We know we have the 7, but this system works to the 12. And at the 8th chakra, it's the causal body, and the causal body holds petals of the soul. So it's what we have to work through, what the personality has to get for the soul's incarnation. And, we all know that we are a soul having a human form, but we've gotten caught in the human stuff. And we're at a time like it's never been before, where we can just really free ourselves from the human aspect of us to know the divine. And the divine is not limited, it's not bound like the personality body is. So I think it's exciting, like where we are in consciousness at this time, and all the amazing energy systems. You know, you guys were sharing with me about what you do and how you're able to get to the causal level at your level and or your in your way. And I know of many people that do, and soul focus healing, just like Reiki or anything else, has a uniqueness to it that it was really left for us in the ancient wisdom teachings, and the time is now. You see what's happening in the medical world today, and I don't know how it happened, but in the last 5 to 10 years, pharmaceuticals have really taken over. And what they don't realize yet, they're starting to, some of the doctors are starting to realize that it affects the consciousness in the body, because we are energy beings and our energy has consciousness. And if you numb it down or you make it distorted in some way, and then the next one happens and the next one happens, and people today are on a lot, and it affects the metabolic system of the body and keeps us open to viruses and disease and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke last night as well, didn't we, about this connection as well between the pineal gland and the pituitary gland, and how, you know, so many of us don't realise that through maybe even a small accident or a knock to the head, it can really disconnect those two. And how do you see that affects people if that has taken place? And I know you showed us a system or a technique that how you reconnect that.
Well, when I was on the medical team in Miami, the doctor and the nutritionist were talking about this person who had chronic fatigue. And then they said all the chronic fatigue, it expresses itself in different ways, because we all have those pockets in our body that are weaker or stronger than others. And what I found and what I shared is that I've seen with 100% of the cases that I've worked with, and I haven't worked with near as many as they have, but there's a disconnect between the pineal and the pituitary gland. And this area of the body is so important because it's where the liquid light from source, it's called ojas, where it comes in. And if you've been knocked in the head, and it can go astray. And, you know, anybody can do it. You know, if you know somebody that's had a head trauma or has chronic fatigue not working, even though you don't know the system, you can simply put your hand, feel it in the field, and then put your hand and just consciously connect the energy between one point and the next. And sometimes when it's been knocked off a while, it takes a couple times. Other times it comes on really quickly.
And how do those symptoms manifest themselves? What takes you to look at that aspect?
Chronic fatigue.
Just that.
Well, I look at that with every single person because I always work with the head centers.
Yeah.
You know, when you connect pineal, pituitary, and carotid, which is, you know, in the back, in the crown, the ajna, and the alta, that's the head centers. It's like a pyramid that we wear over our head. When that is balanced, we're usually pretty healthy. And when that's off, it affects the endocrine system, the nervous system, like all these systems of the body. So everybody that has a session gets that. A soul focused healing session, it's prime.
And have you always had this ability to connect to the energy of things in that way, or is it something that you've trained to do?
The first esoteric class that I had, you know, in the 90s, early 90s, in Chapel Hill, the teacher was a DO. He had been at the University of West Virginia, and he just didn't look in people's eyes, you know. We ended up becoming very good friends over time, you know, and then it changed. But we're all like, you know, just wanting contact. And then it was a 4-day class. I didn't know if I was feeling it. The energy wasn't in the field back then. Now everybody feels it right away.
They do.
But back then it didn't. But by the end of the 4th day, when we were going through all the steps, all the protocols we had learned, it was like, wow, I think I'm feeling something, you know, like, there is this connection. And then I went home, and a friend found me at a party, and we went in a back room that had Crohn's disease. We talked about that. It's like Crohn's disease, and it threw me, his solar plexus threw me across the room, and I just very patiently worked with it and got it there. And he was healed. And every time he had a bout, he would come back to me, and he was completely healed.
Yeah, we know how kind of demoralising and debilitating Crohn's can be, because Paul had it. He doesn't have it any longer.
No. And I think as well, I mean, we touched on yesterday about how the information in the early days of the development of things became very limited. People's limited views were pushed upon us. And I think in developing all of these fields, you start to move into and move away from that and into this more expansive field of not accepting those restrictive belief systems.
Remembering that we're unlimited beings, having a human experience. And as we've experienced it with physical things, it's also our consciousness. It's like, where do we put limits on ourselves? We don't know how, and it's like, there's not anything we can't do if we put our focus behind it. And I think that the medical world has gotten caught in, well, let's see what you've got, 15-minute visit, and give a pill for it. Where, working with something energetically, it's a little longer, and you have to unravel it, and it's piece by piece. But when you get it, it's gone.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
it never returns.
Yeah, I often find that just the consultation before even the
it
hands-on
begins
healing,
then, doesn't it?
Because it reflects back to them what patterns or maybe what traumas or circumstances have contributed to whatever it is that has become out of balance, to that disease or that infliction, doesn't it? And that's so helpful. People say to me, "Oh, do you always?" I say, "Yes, I do," and that's why I think it's important. We were talking last night again about the client or the patient taking responsibility, because you can't give somebody healing and then they go away and they just stay in the same patterns, doing the same thing. This change has to occur, this shift in consciousness, doesn't it? And their receptibility and their openness to want to change, to be willing to change.
Yeah, and you'll find somebody that, for example, that works just psychologically, and then they think they've got it, and a little bit later they get triggered, it's there again, it's there again, and you just go in and you break up the energy. It's a pattern, and that pattern will keep repeating itself, because we're not just these bodies, we're energy beings. We have an emotional body, a mental body, a causal body, and a soul body. And as we clean these bodies, we begin to see who we are, and many of us are beginning to understand that at a whole nother level, that we are a spark of God. We are a spark of divine consciousness. It's contained within the soul at the monad 12th chakra. They call that the Christ consciousness and God consciousness, universal consciousness. And then it has a spark within the heart. And even if you're not going through all the layers of your soul, to go through the layers of your heart and choose to hold unconditional love, stop judging, stop doubting, stop being in fear, be in a state of trust, because there's a whole universe you can trust. And I want to say something about what's going on in our world today, and we have to have such discernment. And that's the heart, is where that discernment is. There's a saying from the Bhagavad Gita, when the mind becomes confused by conflicting statements, it becomes firm in meditation upon God. And that's when we just go into our hearts and connect with what's beyond us, like what's beyond the self, the personality, and all of it. And as AI really comes in, and what's happening in social media and all of that, you have to have such discernment, because it's going to get a lot worse before we're going to get better. It's going to get worse.
Yeah.
And we're creating a new world that's based in love, that's based in unity, that's based in, we really are all the same. We've come from that same spark. And yes, we've had different experiences along the way, but those experiences are not who we are.
No.
You know?
And I can't believe what you've just sat there and said, because earlier I recorded my energetics update, and they were, again, you know, I channel the Federation of Light, but they were talking about exactly what you've just said, using discernment, coming from the heart with everything that we've got, you know, flying at us from the media, from all sorts of angles, the circus, as Jarama calls it, Paul's team of consciousness of ascended masters. And, you know, they're just trying to pull us into that. But the more, you know, the heart is so much more than we realise, isn't it? It's this portal that...
To the universe.
Exactly.
You know?
This
phenomenal.
holographic, they talked about that, you know, and how every cell of us is holographic and is connected, the entire universe is within us. And the more we go into that stillness, the more we connect and align to that stillness, to that divinity, the more we heal.
The more we heal and the more consciousness we have to function with.
Yeah.
And it's like Ali Ali Infri, you know, it's like time. And even if, you know, you haven't done all the layers of work, although you can't help but do whatever's up, that if anything goes like this inside of you, you got some work to do. You know, you just sit there and I don't know that ever ends as long as we have a human form, because we're constantly being triggered by other consciousnesses and other experiences.
I'm laughing again because I told Paul what happened earlier. I'd had a conversation with somebody and I got off the phone and I was a little bit irritated, and my inner voice or my guide said as loud as anything, you need to do your inner work. And I thought, yeah, I do, because that wouldn't have triggered me had I been really centered and focused, you know. So I just worked on that. But like you say, I think when we have a greater consciousness within us and we're awakening more to this consciousness, as so many of us are, we bounce back quicker. Like, I'll notice it quicker.
Really quicker.
Yeah.
You notice it and you take care of it and it's gone. And it's something big. Something happened to me not too long ago and it was like, it took a couple of hours, you know. But before, it would take me days, you know. You know.
Yeah.
And it's because we understand that we are not that it's something that's just old tape, something running through. But what we are is pure consciousness.
Yeah.
And the more, as you say, that you go into that silent place within the heart, the more you know it and you trust it. And it's like, no matter what goes on around you, you're anchored in that center place, in that divine consciousness.
I think knowing is a lovely thing, isn't it? We can trust and do so. But I think when you have it, I remember somebody saying to me once years ago, well, how do you know? I said, I just know. And nothing can shake that when you know. And that you talked about the petals, didn't you, of the soul, that higher chakras and the monad with these different petals of the soul, the causal body. I think that one of those layers of petal was to actually do with knowledge and knowing.
It's the knowledge petals, and it's the outer row of petals, and it's knowledge of self, knowledge of group, and knowledge of God. And we open them, and that's part of our third dimensional journey, to begin to know that, and we start looking up and we start paying attention to our soul a little bit more. And the inner row of petals are love wisdom petals, and they're love of self, love of group, and love of God. And then the last, the inner row of petals is sacrifice of self. And sometimes it's to self. Sometimes you have to take care of you first, you know. But sacrifice to and of self, sacrifice to the group, and sacrifice to God. And I know we talked that sometimes people have a hard time with that word. Yeah, and whatever you call it, that's just what they're called in the esoteric training with those petals. But it's creator, it's primordial vibration, it's consciousness itself, it's divinity, it's the universe. But, you know, think about having a personal relationship with the universe. it's not as easy as having a personal relationship with that divine spark inside your heart. And I spent 20 years or 10 years with the Sufis, and I developed that, and it would speak to me, it would give me guidance. And then I realized, now I call it my I am presence, but that guidance is there if I take my mind and rest there and feel it. And sometimes it takes me getting a little triggered by something or questioning this, and it's like, no. When the I becomes single, thy whole body becomes filled with light. Like, that was not just a cliche. That was the truth with a capital T. And anytime we have issues with anything, it's like we need to look at where those issues come from. And the 11th chakra, well, we have the 9th chakra, we talked about the petals of the soul and the causal body.
Yeah.
And the causal body contains the physical, etheric, emotional, mental body, but it also contains all the knowledge of the soul. And so it's kind of the entry point between those two. And they're functioned by ray frequencies, which are frequencies of the universe, frequencies of qualities of energy. And as we begin to open, as those petals open, we have pure access to our monad. We have pure access, like our consciousness begins to merge with divine consciousness. And then we see we're human, and we see, and I want to say, the thing is we're all doing this together, It's not like, I think if there was such thing as people just being enlightened on their own, we would probably be that way. We've been doing it for 30 years. But we're doing it as a collective this time. Like the masters, they went, the 40 days in the desert or various things and had their experiences. But we're doing it as a collective, allowing the Christ consciousness, the Christ to awaken within us. And all that means is the Christos consciousness, like the altruistic consciousness.
And I think there's so many key elements to what you've been speaking about, and that being more heart-centered. I mean, we did a whole podcast some time ago about being and living more heart-centered, more intentionally living that way. And the fact that divine spark of the divine, of God, or of the whatever you see it as source, is always with you.
Always.
And that wisdom and understanding and that knowing is always with us. Wherever we go, it's always there. We just have to allow ourselves to connect into it.
Right. And same in the same way of that soul, that unlimited consciousness, that active intelligence, the love and wisdom, the will and power. And what I started to say before about the 11th chakra, that's where people hold their belief systems about God. And, it's really interesting when you take someone back into a past life and they were Sicilian and their husbands were part of the mafia. And, you meet all kinds of things. And I was speaking at an expo one time years ago, and then a woman came up to me, and her daughter had MS. And she said, what, where is that? I said, that's really an 11th chakra issues. It's issues with God. And she just got this look on her face, and she said, her father's a preacher. Her father's a minister. So she was stuck under his belief system, and it capped her own 11th chakra, which affected her as MS. So it's really interesting when you begin to see how the different disease processes are old and new karmic. I'm sure it's not the first time she was with a minister or a preacher. And so we keep doing these patterns until we get it. And if we don't get it, we often get a disease process in the...
So bringing it back round now to the soul-focused healing, what would people expect? Number one, like during a session, and number two, if somebody wanted to train as a soul-focused healer.
Well, having a session is one thing, and you can do it distance anywhere. If you look on the Soul Focused Healing website, there's a lot of practitioners around the world. There's a teacher in Germany who's about to do a class in Slovakia.
Yeah.
And then there's another teacher in England. There's 3 of us in the United States. And we'll bring it to you. You come to us, however you want to do it. Or you can have a session and feel how it works for you. I now only do distance work, and not very many, but there's so many practitioners and teachers.
And how long would a normal session last, Deborah?
Usually about 90 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And then you start with, getting a case history and hearing the person talk. And like you said before, I'm watching their soul. I'm fully listening to everything they're saying, but I'm watching what's the soul, because the soul will indicate where everything is. And then I put them on a table, or if I'm doing it distance, I have headphones in and I'm working with them as we're talking. And we just get at the causal level. And I remember once doing it from Asheville with some friends in England, and it was like, I just felt the energy move down my leg. How does that happen? And I'm sure you experience the same thing too.
All the time.
It is. It is quite. I mean, we started distant healing, we used to call it, with spiritual healing very early on, and it really opens your mind up to how we are all connected, and how it's almost like there is somebody actually, with you in that room. So it's such a profound process, I think, as well, when people feel it remotely and they really respond to that. It's such a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think as well that energy is never lost, it's never diminished.
Never.
And because it has that divine consciousness to it, that it knows exactly where it needs to go and where it's directed.
Yes.
And then with our input as well, you can assist that focus of attention.
So in closing, Deborah, I mean, this is another guest. We could sit here and talk for hours. Honestly, it's like sitting listening to everything we say, isn't it? It's just such a wonderful connection.
It's a universal
It
thing.
is,
Imagine when it gets in the collective even more. And I think that time is really coming, because the other medical world is saturated and people are looking for answers and awakening their soul.
Yeah.
The main thing is, no matter where you are, what you're doing, just trust. Just
Absolutely.
trust in your innate consciousness. It's extraordinary to do it. And if you get in a little eddy, little spin, bring it to your heart. The heart just takes it back home, and it's just like, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me for creating a reality separate from you.
So, and is there anything else you would like to say, or do you feel that we've covered so much, but I know there's so much more.
There's always so much more.
Is.
Maybe we'll do something another time, but for now.
And how can people contact you, Deborah?
Probably the best way is soulfocusedhealing.com or Deborah@soulfocusedhealing.com.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll put that all up underneath as well, so people can see it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And on the website, it'll always show where classes are being held and practitioners.
Yeah. Well, I can't recommend Deborah enough. Even just being in her energy field, I can feel so energized and so uplifted and such a lovely soulful connection. And I can, there's a lot of healers out there, but I think when you resonate with one, that is the most important thing, because when you resonate with somebody, really, truly, that's when miracles occur and you're much more in alignment and attunement with your higher self, and that is when profound healing takes place.
I think everything is a connection, everything is an energy between source and ourselves. And also each other. So thank you.
So thank you so
really,
much
for
accepting our invitation at relatively short notice. But I just feel we've such a lovely connection, and yes, I hope we can have you back again, even if it's on Zoom. But yes, it'd be wonderful. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope you've learnt something from this and it inspires you on your healing journey. And to just be open to those greater energies of your higher consciousness, your divine consciousness. Remembering, as Paul and I always say, we are all fractals of the divine. We all have access to that through our heart centre. So I hope you can feel our hearts. We're sending you all our love. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and before we say goodbye, we'd just like to remind you to like, share, and comment below. We really appreciate that, just to help this community grow. We've already spoken about community and working together, and that's what this podcast is very much about.
Yes.
And with that, it just leaves us to say
Thank you for joining us, and namaste.
Namaste.